Hello friends! In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to paint this vintage perfume bottle in Procreate. This is not a drawing tutorial. Instead, we're going to be focused on the painting process as I show you how to achieve this look using just one digital brush. Let's dive in. I have my canvas set to 4000 by 3000 pixels at 300 dpi. If you don't have enough storage on your iPad for a file this large, you can use the pre-formatted screen size canvas, which will give you the same aspect ratio but at a smaller size and lower resolution. The brush we'll be using is in the Procreate brush library, so go to the gouache set, and we'll be using Gatsby. I've already done a full review on this brush, which you can watch if you want to get familiar with how it behaves before we begin. I'll leave a link to that video in the corner and in the description below. Here's a quick peek at my sketching process. I mostly use the Waratah pencil, and surprisingly, I loved it for this sketch. After I reviewed this brush, I didn't think I'd use it much, but it actually turned out to be the perfect option for getting the basic shape down in a few quick, loose strokes. Once I figured out the basic sketch, I switched to the Huntsman pencil for the details like the flowers and the lettering. You're welcome to draw this in your own style, or you can skip the drawing process altogether because I created a template for you which you can use as a guide for the painting. There's a link in the description for the free download, but if you're one of my email subscribers, I've already sent you the downloads, so be sure to check your inbox. With the download, you'll also receive the color palette we'll be using for this project, which you can import directly into Procreate. Before we start painting, I'd love if you'd like, comment, subscribe, and watch till the very end because it really helps the channel. Okay, let's import the template. Go to the Actions menu, tap Add, tap Insert a Photo, and if you've already downloaded and saved the template, find it in your camera roll and tap to import. Now go to that template layer, tap the N and change the blending mode to multiply. Then reduce the opacity so the template is very transparent. Now create a new layer and drag it below the template layer. And keep in mind that all of our painting layers will be below the template. Let's start by painting the bottle, and we're going to use the blush pink from the palette. So we're just going to start by outlining the shape. And this lower section will be hidden behind the tassels, so you can finish the shape of the bottle or you can leave that area partially finished. It's up to you. But of course, you're going to complete the shape at the top of the bottle. Then you can increase the brush size to thicken that outline, but you're going to leave a little white space at the top where the angle of the bottle changes. In this lower section, continue to thicken that outline along both sides and along the bottom. And again, we're going to leave the center blank. Now switch to the smudge tool and make sure it's also set to Gatsby. And we're basically going to push that color around until it blends into the white. Let me just turn the template off so it's easier to see here. Now, although this is a gouache brush, we're going for a soft, almost watercolor look here. You want this to look like a nice kind of watered down wash. So you'll do the same for this top section as well. Now we still want to keep some of the white in the center for highlight, but we're just blending away the hard edges so the pink softly transitions to the white. We're not aiming for a perfectly smooth look though. The slight value shifts and visible brush marks will help make it look hand-painted. Now let's define the shape at the top here and also along the sides. So change the color to the dark blush and reduce the brush size quite a bit. Then you're going to add some of that darker color along the top edge of the bottle, then towards the bottom to create some shadow behind the tassel and behind the pump as well. Do the same here below the bottle cap and along this top edge as well. And then you're going to add that darker color along this curved line. Switch to the smudge tool and turn off the template to better see what you're doing. Then go ahead and blend that darker color. Again, rather than using typical brush strokes, you're going to just push the color around until you get the result you like. You'll notice that depending on what direction you move your pencil, it will either remove some of the color or spread it around. Now this line helps define the shape of the bottle, but we don't want it to be quite so stark, so let's soften that up. We can use long strokes for this rather than the pushing technique we were using before. Okay, the bottle is more or less done. Now let's tackle the top. Create a new layer and make sure it's above the bottle layer. As you can see here, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sections to this cap. We're going to paint each one on a separate layer, then merge them. And we're going to start with this big oval. Let's switch the color to gold. And we're not going to outline the entire thing. We're just going to add color to most of the right side. So start along the top edge and stop right around here where the highlight is marked on the template. Then continue your way around until you get to the bottom edge of the oval. You should have about that much of the outline painted. Then increase the brush size and make that outline much thicker. Switch to the smudge tool and we're going to blend this. Now we want there to be a highlight on this side. So the goal is to push the color around until it fades almost to white on the left. Like I mentioned earlier, the direction you push will determine the result you get. For example, you can push into the color to remove some of it if you want to lighten an area, or you can push the color outward to spread it and make an area darker. If you use circular motions, you get a nice, subtle, painterly blend. So play around with it and see what results you get. Don't forget to turn the template off occasionally to get a better look so you can clean up some areas if necessary. Okay, I think that's working well. I'm going to call that layer Bottle Top 1. Then you're going to create a new layer and drag it below. We're going to ink this little section at the top. We're only going to paint part of this section, just like we did with the oval. Then switch to the smudge tool and smooth out that transition. Now this brush is not 100% opaque, especially with the technique we're using, so you can see those paint strokes showing through. You can just switch to the eraser tool in the same brush and make sure it's set to a small size, and just erase those sections you don't want to show through. All right, let's name that layer. And if your template was off, turn that back on. Create a new layer and make sure it's below Bottle Top 2. We're going to paint this little neck right here. This is a pretty small area and it will mostly be in shadow because the section above is a much larger shape, so there's not going to be much highlight on this section. I'm going to leave a little white section here, but most of it will fill in as I blend. Don't forget to use the eraser tool to clean up any overlapping areas or rough edges. Now let's tackle the fourth section. Create a new layer and drag it below Bottle Top 3. First outline the bottom of the oval and fill a little bit on the right side. Then on this rectangular section, you're going to outline the right side and the bottom edge. Then thicken that outline and fill in a little more on the right side. So you should have the right side of the oval and the right side of the rectangle shape painted in the gold. Now switch to the yellow, and you can add a little of this lighter color on the left side. So this time we're going to add a little color to the highlighted area. Then you're going to blend those colors with the smudge tool. And even though we've added the gold to the highlight, you still want to leave some white in those highlighted areas. On this section, you want this area to be lighter so it creates some separation from the top of the shape. First, I'm going to push the gold towards the white until I get a decent transition. Now I can push the yellow towards the middle and then kind of go back and forth until I get a good blend. All right, we have one last section. So create a new layer and drag it below Bottle Top number 4. Then we're going to switch back to the gold. And we're going to follow the same process here, outlining the right side and bottom edge, then thicken that line. And you can add a little of the yellow to the left side like we did in the section above. Then go ahead and blend with the smudge tool. Okay, now we have all 5 sections of the bottle top. We've included a highlight and a mid-tone. Now let's add a darker value. And we're going to do that for each individual section. So let's go to the bottle top 1 layer, turn on alpha lock, then switch the color to mustard. Add a line along the right side and towards the bottom of that shape. Remember, with alpha lock on, we don't have to worry about coloring outside the lines. Then you're going to blend with the smudge tool. Now go to the bottle top 2 layer, turn on alpha lock, and do the same there as well. Then you're just going to continue to work your way through each of the bottle top layers, adding the darker color to beef up the contrast, and then blending with the smudge tool to soften that transition. If you're pleased with how everything looks, you can pinch those 5 layers together to merge them down to 1 layer. Don't forget to turn off alpha lock when you're done. Okay, the bottle is done. Now let's move on to the atomizer, starting with the sprayer bulb. Create a new layer and make sure it sits above the other layers we just painted. Now switch the color to pink and outline that oval shape. It's easier if you start with a fairly small brush size. Then you can increase the brush size and fill most of the oval with that color. But you're going to leave this section blank. Switch to the smudge tool and move the color around until you get a decent blend. Now, since we didn't add any paint in this section, we can see right through it. So we need to actually paint the highlight this time. So switch the color to blush and fill this area with that lighter color. Then you can blend that in with the smudge tool. Now let's add a bit more color to brighten that up. So let's first switch the color to rose, and we'll add a few strokes of this bright color along the bottom edge. Then go ahead and blend that in. I think we can make it even brighter. So go to that layer, turn on alpha lock, then switch the color to red. Then you're going to add that color along the bottom edge, then use a smudge tool to soften that color transition. You can use circular motions to push the red into the pink until you get a decent blend. Now let's tackle this small section here right above the top of the tassel. We're going to paint that on a separate layer. So create a new layer and drag it below the sprayer pump layer. We're going to paint this in red as well. This will be really straightforward. We're just going to outline that shape and fill with solid color. And you can use the eraser tool to clean up the shape if you need to. Now let's paint these 2 sections that are going to be in gold. Create a new layer and make sure it sits between the sprayer pump and the small section above the tassel that we just painted. Switch the color to gold. First outline the shape at the top of the pump and fill with color just along the top and the right side. Do the same for this shape below the pump as well. Now switch to the yellow and add a couple strokes of that brighter color on the left side of each shape. Then we'll blend with the smudge tool. Remember, this brush is semi-transparent, so if there's not enough color there, you'll see right through it once you start blending. So if you need to, add more of the yellow to give better coverage in that area. And I actually think I'll also add a little white for more of a highlight. Then you can go back to blending. When you're done with the highlights and midtones, go to that layer with the gold caps, turn on alpha lock, then switch to the mustard. Add a little of that darker color along the right side of each of those shapes. Then blend with the smudge tool to soften that color transition. Okay, let's paint the hose next. Create a new layer, Then drag it to the bottom of the layer stack so it's below all of your painted layers. Then switch the color to blush. Outline and fill that shape. Now go to that layer, turn on Alpha Lock, then switch to the dark blush. Add a line of that darker color along the bottom edge of the hose. Then as usual, use the smudge tool to soften that transition. Now we're going to switch to the pink and add a little value contrast on both ends where the hose connects. Then you'll use the smudge tool to soften that up as well. Now for the tassels. Create a new layer, and as you can see, the tassels will be in front of the bottle. So drag the new layer up so it's above the bottle top layer. Then switch the color to rose. Make sure your brush size is fairly large, and you're going to make long curving strokes. As you're drawing these lines, you'll want to ease up on the pressure as you come to the end of the stroke so you get that nice taper at the end. So you'll have to kind of flick your wrist a little at the end of each stroke. Okay, let me turn the template off to get a better look here, and I think we need more color. So let's switch to the red. Make the brush size a little smaller, then add a few more strokes here and there to build up the layers and make the tassel look a little more full. You don't want to completely cover up the pink though, so space these out a little more. You can make some of the lines long while others can be shorter. Just switch things up a bit to keep it visually interesting. I think we should add a lighter value as well. So let's see, switch to the dark blush. Make the brush size even smaller and add a few strokes in this lighter color. Okay, I think that works. Now let's paint the details. We're going to start with the leaves, so create a new layer, then drag it down so it's right above the bottle layer. Then switch the color to mint green. Drop the brush size down so it's very small, maybe 3 or 4%. Then outline and paint all the leaves. When we painted the tassels, you might have noticed that we shifted away from the soft watercolor look, and we've started working with more opaque color. So we'll do the same with these details as well. We're going to keep the color really solid and opaque for all the leaves and flowers. So you can go back and forth with several layers of color if you need to in order to get complete coverage. All right, once you've got all the leaves painted, turn the template off for a second. Then change the color to dark mint. Then you're going to go back to the leaf layer and turn on Alpha Lock. Now add a line or two of that darker green along the edge of each leaf for a little contrast. Now create a new layer above the leaf layer and switch the color to light blue. And we're just going to use a few short strokes to paint the buds. So I'm just using 3 strokes here, starting at the center, then the strokes on either side are angled outward slightly. Now let's paint this first flower on the left. Create a new layer above the blue flowers, then switch the color to peach. And we're simply going to outline that shape, then fill with color. Now you can switch the color to orange, and add those curved strokes in the center to represent the petals. By the way, I'm doing all of this on the same layer. Now create a new layer and make sure it's above the orange flower we just painted. Then switch the color to hot pink. Follow the same process for painting this flower. For the petal shapes in the center, I'm going to use magenta, but you can use a different color combo if you prefer. I think I'll actually add a little highlight here too. For the last flower, create a new layer, and as you can see, this one sits behind the other 2 flowers. So drag the new layer down so it's below the pink and orange flowers. Then switch the color to rose. Go ahead and paint that flower as well. Then we can use the blush for the petal details. All right, the layers panel is getting a little crowded, so I'm going to select all the flower and leaf layers and group them together. Now we're going to ink the lettering. So let's create a new layer and switch to the red. Make sure the brush size is very small, maybe somewhere between 2 or 3%. Then take your time to outline and fill each of the letters. I like to start with all the straight lines first and then tackle the curves. Once you have an enclosed shape, you can do a quick drop fill. Just keep in mind that sometimes the shapes will be a little too small for the drop fill to work effectively. So in a case like this, it's actually easier to just fill it manually. Now, since this is a paintbrush with some texture to it, it's not ideal for super clean lettering, but that's okay. We're going for a vintage vibe with this painting, so using a brush with a super clean edge might look a bit out of place for this piece. Also, those edges won't be quite so noticeable when we zoom out, so I think it'll be fine. All right, the last thing we need to add is the drop shadow. First, we need to turn up the opacity on the template quite a bit so we can see the shadow outline. Now create a new layer, then drag it all the way down to the bottom of the layer stack. Change the color to sea glass, and we're going to go back to that soft kind of watercolor look. So first outline the shape, then use the smudge tool to soften those edges. All right, I think we're all done. There's our vintage perfume painting. I hope you had fun with this process, and if you enjoyed this video, remember to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.